So in my last matcha video, I mentioned that I don't always look for organic matcha. It's not my primary concern, and it also does not guarantee a high quality matcha. But one thing I do think is important is looking for a third-party tested matcha. There are a couple of things that are important to test for. Number one is radiation. Past nuclear happenings in Japan unfortunately have had lasting radiation effects. And although most parts of Japan are within a normal radiation range, there are still some areas that are higher risk because they have higher levels of radioactivity. The Japanese government does have suggestions for which radioactive substances to test for when it comes to food, and so the same thing applies to matcha. It's also important to test for pesticides and herbicides, and although there are pretty strict guidelines as far as growing practices in Japan, it's still very important because especially with matcha, it is the only tea where you ingest the whole leaf, and so whatever is on that leaf and in that leaf, you are ingesting. And a side note, organic matcha does not mean that there are no pesticides being used, because organic pesticides exist too. Heavy metal testing is also really important because, once again, we are ingesting the whole leaf. The top 3 matcha brands that I always recommend, they all third-party test, which is great, but if you're ever wondering how to figure out whether or not a matcha brand third-party tests, the best thing you can do is check the website or simply reach out and ask them.